and I am back here in the fandom zone. Welcome to General Zod's review. I've gotten requests to go back to the car format as I used to do, so we are in General Zod's Dictator Mobile. And I am here to bring you yet another review. I am doing my review on The Mandalorian, Chapter 4, Sanctuary. And before we get started, I'm just going to do a breakdown because I've been seeing a lot of people who post reviews and they talk about, is Disney going back to this or that? People, I know that we are used to the Star Wars crap. There's a lot of distrust now between Star Wars fans and Disney. But I would like to point out, this show has not given me a reason not to like it or to feel like it's not being partial or fair. So therefore, I will continue to support this till I see a lot of themes that I don't like in it. But the problems in this are not the ones I'm hearing pointed out. And I'm going to get to those when I get to my cons. I will say that this show proves that some shows need to be released all at once, and I will tell you why. So here's how we do it. We're going to do my overview, the cons, or the pros, the cons, and then I'm going to tell you whether or not Zod approves, and I'm going to give you my rating on the episode. So here we go. Let's jump into this. Episode 4, or Chapter 4, takes place after the events of Chapter 3. Now, here's problem number 1. Chapter 3 was so good, and I'll be releasing it after this, just because this is the newest review. But anyways, Chapter 3 was so good that I honestly think it almost felt like a season final. And when you have something like that, the preceding episode has to elevate itself so high to top that. And, this is where you have some shows that show inconsistency because of the fact that they'll have that one good episode, and sometimes the show's not able to keep up that momentum. Now, I'll have to see Chapter 5 to know whether or not that's the case. But here's another thing, and I want everybody who will watch this, go back and watch every single episode. If you notice, this show seems to do something odd. It's like they want to do dark and light. So watch each episode. Episode 1 was dark, okay, by comparison, right? Setting up the world. A lot of people made that comment. Episode 2 was lighter. You had the stuff with Yoda, you had the Jawas, you had jokes. Episode 3 was dark. This episode, lighter. I think this is the pattern the show is going for. So if I'm right, and we'll see when Chapter 5 rolls around, then Chapter 5 should be a bleaker chapter. I think he's spacing out how much darkness is in this show to kind of even out the tone, which in a sense hurts the tone, and I'll get to that. But here are my pros for the show. Once again, I feel like the show does have some strong character development. I'm getting a lot about The Mandalorian, and I also picked up on some things that people may have misconstrued in their review, and I know because I literally just got done watching the episode. Gina Carrera is in this show, and she plays a former shock trooper, and I think that they know each other, and everyone was saying, oh, how was he like this? But if you notice the way they talk and their body language, I think they know each other from the past, and the wording she said, well, I was a stormtrooper, and then or a shock trooper, and then, remember and was using a lot of adjectives that signify that she knows him. So I think the Mandalorian knew her from before and attacked her thinking that she was on a bounty, and as opposed to her just being a random character. I think there's some back history, and their relationship spoke like former friends. So I think they know each other, but once again, the writing doesn't specify. And I'll get to that when I get to my cons. Also, some people are on the fence whether or not this was a Disney moment. If you know Gina Carrera, I've seen her in other stuff, and she's also a fighter. She's done boxing and things like that, some UFC stuff. She is a fighter, and I like the fact they picked out a female who looks the part of someone who could be in this rough and tough kind of environment, right? Um, if they were using a Scarlett Johansson or a Brie Larson for this fight and she threw the Mandalorian around like she did, then maybe I might have had some issue with that. But it was a fair fight, and the fact that it ended in a draw, I appreciated that. They also established something. The Mandalorian is unstoppable to a point, but it's been kind of specified as hand-to-hand combat is not up there with the other Mandalorians. If you remember back in episode 3 and he got into that fight with that big old heavy artillery Mandalorian, he drawed there too. And honestly, I don't know if he would have won, but he's, in a sense, the smallest out of everyone. That's not to say he's not a badass. He's proven it through the show, but he's not like the level of like a Jango Fett or a Boba Fett or any of those. And even those guys got beat pretty quickly. So just because he's a Mandalorian and they're a warrior race, there's different classes. And I think he's kind of middle of the road, really, watching all the stuff he's gone through. Like the average, smuggler or whatever else, he'd just blow him away. But someone who's got some competent fighting skills would be a match for him. I mean, someone who's trained and disarms him. If you notice, he goes to his guns a lot, right? His sidearm, his blaster, with the scope. And his, their whole thing is tricks, right? He's got the flamethrower, the little whistler things with the missiles. So he depends highly on the tech. And that doesn't mean he's not competent, but it does mean that I feel like his hand-to-hand is just enough to get him out of a situation, but he's more adept in weapons. And I appreciate that because when I was in the service, you had some people who were better in hand-to-hand combat and some people who shoot better. I shot middle of the road, but I'm decent in hand-to-hand combat. And so I could relate to that. And she was a shock trooper. If you know shock troopers, they have those sticks that stun people. They're trained in hand-to-hand. So it does explain how she's able to, get them in a compromising position. And that being said, I like how Jon Favreau didn't make it like she won. They essentially went in a draw. They would have both killed each other, and then, it didn't happen. So I respected that. I liked them bringing the ATs. I had heard like, oh, what is it doing in the woods? Look, watch Return of the Jedi. Why they put it in the woods, I don't know, but it looked to me like it was stolen and that these guys were just using it. And judging by the village they were attacking, they weren't equipped for something like that. I liked that, and I liked how the ending played out, and that was about it. The dialogue was strong and the shots were strong and all that stuff, as per every episode I've watched. Also, I appreciated that the makeup for the dog creatures was really good. It was really stellar makeup, less CGI. So I did that because my complaints before was the CGI. Now my cons. There's quite a few in this episode. I don't like the slowdown, and I've mentioned this before. The pacing is phenomenally off between episodes. You had the first episode, which was decently both slow and fast, and they sandwiched the action nicely. You had the second episode, to me, which was a little bit slower, but there was some moving action, and then the end. The third episode, nonstop. It had its exposition, but nonstop. The last scene was just epic. It was great. And then you have this episode, and they try to do the same thing, but I feel like some of the fighting for me was unrealistic. For instance, I saw the one scene that people are talking about where she runs out with the blaster and goes for the AT-AT with no armor and whatnot, but I can chalk that up to the old Star Wars theory. You've seen stormtroopers, right? They're the most inaccurate ever. I think this pays homage to the films because in the films, you have 15 people and none of them could hit Luke or anyone. It's just an old trope. I don't think it's necessarily a woman power thing. Um, and also, uh, the villagers learning to shoot and things like that, and the one picked it up. Once again, I don't really consider this them, doing much of a nod, maybe just trying to throw in something just to please people, whatever. It's in film. We'll deal with it. Um, Also, I did not like how some of the action scenes played out. Gina Carano is probably going to have a bigger role in the future. It's pretty evidently pointed out. But I feel like some of her lines were okay at best. She didn't really inspire this badassery. Like when the Mandalorian talks, I feel like a crowd will listen. When she talks, it was just kind of like, she's giving that big speech to the crowd. It was all right for me. Also, too, I didn't like that one scene where he took off his helmet. They didn't show anything, but um, granted, the person left the room or whatever. I mean, it did tell you, yeah, he has to take off his helmet to eat food, but I don't think it was really needed. I just assumed he has to take his gear off. I mean, how smelly would that thing be? How does he shower? I mean, these are all questions that are probably nonsensical, but I mean, you don't really have to show that. I think the show implied uh by the way he answers questions and stuff that yeah, every once in a while they don't let their enemy take their gear off. That doesn't necessarily mean they don't remove their helmet from time to time. Otherwise, there'd be no Mandalorians. I just think it's more of a people don't see who's under the mask. You don't reveal yourself. You don't let someone strip you of your armor, kind of a thing. So I think that was kind of unnecessary and kind of pandered to people who are like, oh, does he ever eat? You're an idiot. Of course he eats. Of course he's got to take his gear off. I mean, come on. Use common sense. And I don't like when filmmakers try to explain stuff that's explicitly explained. Also, again, the slowdown is going to be an issue. And this brings me to my next point. This serves better in the Netflix format of releasing all 8 episodes because if I watch them 1, 2, and 3, and 4, I do see the inconsistency. Now, 5 could be an action-packed, mile-a-minute episode, right? And you just needed 4 to break it up. But I really think this show serves releasing all at once. The week-to-week format, you have to have good pacing. Otherwise, you get monotonous episodes and there's no context because then once you watch a full season, you could see why there was slowdown. Like Arrow season 1, uh, some episodes were slow to me, but then when I watch the series as a whole and I see the beats, I'm like, boom, 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 boom. You see, all right, season 1 is perfect all the way through because I can follow it consistently. Whereas when you're watching it, you get an episode and you're like, oh, I can wash the dishes or do whatever else. And they picked this one to make the 40-minute episode, which I don't understand. I think last week should have been 40 minutes because it was so good. But then again, maybe it would have destroyed the flow. I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what they do in 5. So does Zod approve? Zod does approve. I think there was some good character development in the Mandalorian himself. We saw other sides of Baby Yoda. I like when he didn't eat the frog. I think it shows self-awareness that he realized he was in front of like a village and he did something cute. I like them showing that self-awareness because he's clearly a Jedi of some kind and they're more intuitive. And uh, once again, the dynamic between the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda is great. And I like to see where that goes. And I liked how they showed that no matter where they go, this bounty thing is going to track them. They've got a tracker, and he can't just settle. He's got to find a place to get rid of this or somewhere where that kid will be definitively safe or they'll be hunted for the rest of their lives. So I'll be interested to see how they resolve this. Um, so Zod approves, but my rating is going to be lower on this one. I'm going to give it a 7. I gave episode 2 a 7.5 simply because of the character development between Yoda and the Mandalorian. and how the Mandalorian essentially owed his life, which was important to episode 3. And watching them all in context, I could review it better. This one, I feel like the some of the exposition wasn't needed. Some of Gina Carruthers' lines were corny, and some of the action wasn't as good as it could have been. It was there, but it wasn't as thrilling coming off of 3. I think I had a high on 3, and they slowed me down to a halt with 4. Hopefully this leads, because they brought this village up, they brought her character up for a reason, so I'm hoping that in the writing, this is going to swing back around later. To that villager, the lady there, I think there was something between her and the Mandalorian. I would like to see this as maybe an end game, like when this is all over, he's going to try to find a life away from his warrior's code and settles down. That I would like to see that, or he dies. Either way, I'm curious. I'm definitely curious, and for me, I don't think the show loses anything. I just think this is a filler episode, and it's padding. And for a filler, you could do a whole lot worse. So a solid 7. Zod approves. I would almost say wait till 5 and then watch 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's like you gotta wait till the next episode and then watch them all again to see how it connects. But I went back through and I watched 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so 4 feels like the roadblock. It's like uh, elevation, 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 drop. So we'll see how 5 turns out. Anyways, this has been another review from General Zod's Fandom Zone. If you liked the video, hit that like button. If you are new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you, beautiful people, and kneel before your General Zod. If you liked the video, hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. Welcome to the Fandom Zone.